Hi, I'm Alastair,
Hi, I'm Luke.
and together we're the founders of Flinder. So today we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation around how and why we both got into accounting. So, Luke, first of all, I'll ask you, why did you get into accounting all those years ago?
Yeah, so after I did my degree at university, coming up to just towards the end of it, decision of what to do next. Did maths, so quite a few of my friends, similar field, a few went into actuary, accountancy, someone else did completely different things. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, if I'm honest, and the fact that others applied for accountancy, I looked at jobs that were available in London, and a couple of opportunities. I got shortlisted for the first two I applied for, and the first one where I had the interview come along, I went along and I was successful in the first interview and asked to come back for an assessment day. So that was kind of how I actually found it. Very lucky. Every job interview I've ever had, I've been offered the job as well, and since, and then obviously starting our own business.
So how many job interviews have you had that you've had
So
100% success rate from?
It would be 4. My first one before when I was at uni in terms of part-time job, my first role, and then before I joined PwC, I interviewed for another top 6 firm, got offered both of them day after each other and took PwC. So pretty successful interview ratio, and no more interviews in my life.
And none more needed.
Exactly,
which
that.
is pretty cool.
What about yourself?
So actually, before we get to that, a couple of things. One is you mentioned a few of your friends were wanted to be actuaries.
Yeah.
And they do say actuaries make accountants look like rock stars, right?
Yeah.
In terms of excitement and such like. But you were studying in Manchester. So why did you look for a job down in London?
Just because of where my roots are. I grew up in Croydon, Wallingham area, and wanted to come back to London, really be closer to family, and London was the natural selection. So.
Cool. And there was a couple of things. So you talked about PwC and you talked about pre that, and we'll talk about that, I guess, in a second. For me, it's a bit similar, but a bit different in the, and not many people know this actually. So I was studying maths at Liverpool because it was one of those things I was very good at, and kind of a natural kind of extension from college, just like what you're doing. But actually, 18 months into that course, I really struggle with how is this relevant to real life? Like proving root 2 being a real number, like what's the relevance in life of that? And so I actually took a different approach and applied for accounting positions in smaller firms and left university and then went a different path to you.
So you left university before you'd finished?
I left university before I finished, but after I was offered a trainee in a traineeship in an accounting firm. So I don't have a degree, no. But what's interesting, right? So you and I worked at PwC for many years, some of those together. In those 16 years at PwC, once you're a chartered accountant or a qualified accountant, it makes absolutely no difference at all within a firm as to whether you have a degree or don't have a degree. It's that hurdle of the qualification, which is what you need, and then how you perform, of course.
And that's reflective of us taking on apprentices as well, and apprentices scheme that ACCA are doing. Yeah, both of our apprentices have had degrees and they're both graduates, but you don't have to be. You don't have to be to go through it as well.
So for me, I was always destined to have to go to university, or destined to go to university and down that route. But actually, once I was there, I really struggled with the relevance of it. And in hindsight, I could have switched to a business-orientated course or accounting, whatever. But actually, I really wanted to go down the real-life scenario. Or the real life path and do the accounting at the same time?
Maybe going off on a tangent here, but actually the first 2 years of your professional qualification, a lot of people struggle with what is the relevance to day-to-day real life. So actually you're learning to pass exams and how you apply that in the workplace, and why it's so important to do it through a graduate employer, through kind of like we're doing at the moment, is that you then get to apply it to real life. Whereas I imagine if you're self-studying, it'd be so difficult to how to apply it into
not
an
working in an accounting firm?
You self-study in industry and just self-study if you're doing other things at the same time.
Totally agree. They go hand in hand well. And we obviously have a couple of apprentices doing the ACCA program at the moment, and so it blends itself nicely, the work and the study together. Both of those in isolation would be quite difficult.
Yeah. So the other thing similar to our background is we both trained with small firms.
I was going to pick up on that next.
Ended up in PwC. What was your attraction to a smaller firm? I think I was quite clear in mine. I applied for 2 roles, and the first one that I went along to, I was successful, so I didn't bother with the second one.
So this goes back a few years, because I'm a little bit older than you. So I guess kind of the kind of going and having that interview in that place, and it was a firm called Livesey Spottiswoode in the northwest of England, because I then worked in Manchester at PwC, and I was at Liverpool University, and so I liked the environment. I liked the fact that I would learn from the ground up and really understand what's going on. I would never diss kind of the program in the Big Four. But when somebody audits fixed assets for 6 months, do they really and then cash for 6 months and so like? But do they really on a huge multinational? Do they really understand the nuts and the bolts and the debits and the credits and the whole kind of the interlinking of everything, whereas you would do after 12 months in a very small firm? So I think for me, kind of that was absolutely superb grounding, and still to this day, working there for the first kind of 18 months, 2 years, whatever it was. Absolutely superb grounding for what I know and kind of the way I face certain challenges with some of our clients. So for me, that's invaluable.
And that's why my transition from, say, Morley and Scott, who become Menzies, my transition to PwC was to a regional office.
Morley and Scott, I didn't know that was the name of the firm. So I knew it was
Morley and Scott, was the name of the firm originally, and they got taken over by Menzies. But that's why my transition to a PwC regional office was actually a good change, because I wasn't going from the small, like A3 pages of accounts prep files to working on large multinationals, but I then got that experience and exposure of multinational companies, but on the smaller scale.
And how many people were in your first firm?
When I first joined, we were only one office, probably about 50 in total.
50?
50 across the board. They were a top 50 firm at the time when I joined them. About 10 partners. Okay. So that sort of size.
But 50 people across 10 partners?
Yeah.
That ratio is quite interesting.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit more than that when we got towards the end of when we then got taken over by Menzies, merged with Menzies. And we may be 80, 90 people by then.
So I joined and there were 5 partners, then soon to be 4 because one left, but probably about 40 to 50 people at any one time.
Yeah.
So yeah, slightly different ratio. But again, probably superb grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I spent my first year doing accounts prep work.
And so one thing you talked about A3 files, right? So you learned properly on a proper cash book system with kind of one side is your cash and bank and the other side your expenses, and kind of you go along the columns to.
By the time I left, the most computer based we got was preparing the schedules and working papers on a computer to print them out to put them into a
paper file.
As opposed to an automated, I think our last 6 months it was an automated CCH kind of software. Which I guess.
So but I did that many years before you, right? Yeah. And we had those terminals for the actual accounts prep when I joined, and then my first day at PwC I was handed a laptop, and that was in 2001. But 2001 you hadn't started yet by that point, right?
They were good for the pace.
Yeah. So I was running around with a laptop plugging into fax machines at PwC while you were still working with paper then, I guess, or not even.
Yeah, but we communicated with clients with emails, etc. So we were using technology.
It's crazy to think, isn't it?
But the audit side of things just wasn't fully software automated at that time. Yeah.
It's crazy to think you had to phone a client to arrange a meeting rather than just fire off an email, which is good. Well, it's good in a way, right?
I had emails
about at one point.
Years later,
and calculators.
But the interesting thing, we've talked about exams as well. After going through uni, I thought I didn't want to do another exam in my life. And then on the assessment day, when the managing partner, I still remember a gentleman called Stanley, stood up and spoke about the exams and the commitment.
General Stanley?
No, a gentleman called Stanley stood up and spoke about the commitment we're making to the next 3 years and the study. My heart dropped, but then I'm glad I stuck with it and I made the decision.
And so how many years before you then joined PwC, and why did you join PwC?
So I joined PwC just after time of qualification.
So 3 years.
Yeah, so I did my training contract. So it was. I had the last month of my training contract was technically on gardening leave,
right?
Purely because they were actually going through some redundancies, right. But it just fitted really well. One of the still good friend that worked at Menzies at the time, he joined PwC a year before into their audit transformation team, and he kind of raved about it and said how great it was, and thankfully I listened to him and joined PwC, otherwise I wouldn't be here now.
Yeah, exactly. Where we met, obviously, 5 years ago, I guess. Yeah. And for me, I jumped from where I was to PwC purely for a better study package. And I don't mean more money or that sort. I meant kind of the more structured college day release training that we did with FTC or what's now Kaplan, and that in itself was a huge differentiator between a small firm and at that time and a firm like PwC. There was a massive contrast. You know, we go from very small working with very small clients, which has stood us in great stead for kind of what we do now and kind of how we see and work from the ground up with our organisation, our clients, our partners. But then I remember my first client, the revenue was $500 million revenue, right? And so now, like the clients I've worked with in my last 10 years at PwC is actually quite a small client. Maybe not when we were at MFP, but in my time in advisory, that would be a pretty small client, $500 million in revenue. And I went from where I was, you know, small local organizations, turning over like $1 million to be big. And I'm like, fuck, like, oh my God. Like, and it just, you know, it might just be adding a few zeros, but at the time it was kind of like, holy shit. Like this is like a totally different league. It's soon then kind of embedded, but it was a huge contrast between the style of work we did and the way in which we did it to working with those large organisations, which we did something called TPA, towards performance audit at the time. I don't know if you were saying, but basically, it was much more focused on controls, which is, you know, stood us in good stead for what we do around finance function excellence now. So some huge learnings, but certainly for me it was moving for the study package, which I guess is why one of the reasons we really focus on associates and the study package and what we offer. And being a platinum ACCA training provider is really important to us.
Yeah, and it is reflective of we've worked in a large corporate, whilst some aspects of that was good in terms of the training, our overall pension, during the overall support we give our employees, is then just completely different culture. Yeah,
exactly.
And so, I guess you've probably been asked this before, if you weren't an accountant, what do you think you would be? What do you think you would have ended up doing?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So for me, I always wanted, even though I studied, or partly studied maths at university, and the reason actually for that was because I was gearing towards actuarial science and becoming an actuary. And so if I wasn't going to go into that realm, it would very much have been kind of a bit more creative down that architecture side of things. That's what I really wanted.
Because you're quite creative, you do a lot of our creative stuff.
I wasn't a geek as a kid, but I do remember drawing like drafting plans for houses, which, like, if you say it now, people are like, what? I used to love drawing elevation plans for houses, and like, God knows, I used to absolutely love it, the creative stuff. And so for me, it would definitely have been architecture. Maybe I would have stuck 7 years at university for that. I don't know, but that was kind of what I really wanted to go into. And my dad advised me against it for many reasons. But how about yourself?
I had the dilemma of didn't know what I wanted to do, so I kind of almost fell into the accounting. But I think in terms of my experiences post getting into accounting, I think if tomorrow accountants were no more, probably be quite enjoying my special counsel stuff. So probably sat down the police line, just as something completely different. But I'm fortunate enough that I've never had to worry about jobs and roles.
So not a skiing instructor then?
You that would be good. I do a lot of that in my spare time anyway, but it's you can't really make a living out of it. Actually, police officers can't really make a great living either, so it's a difficult balance, I guess.
So yeah, I guess we're both quite fortunate in how we not landed, because it was direct. We were obviously responsible for our own direction, but quite fortunate in terms of the choices we made to get into accounting, because it's not only accounting, but it's the backbone to business. It's business, so you can do so much with accounting and accounting qualification, the experiences, the business acumen. I think I really feel supremely fortunate to be an accountant.
I think especially where we started off, and in the middle, both of us went to larger, so to say, corporations, clients we worked on. But then when we've come back to it in MFP, and then obviously what we're doing, it does allow us to see the whole business, to be that trusted business advisor, as opposed to just being the accountant and being seen as the audit team or the accountant.
Yeah, I had this conversation with someone just the other day, in the profession of accountants is completely and utterly misunderstood outside the world of accountants, in terms of what we do, how we do it, the disciplines within accounting, the fun factor that we have as accountants is very, very misportrayed, I think, to the public in what we do. And I guess we're on a mission to change that myth with some other kind of accountants that are at the forefront and being a bit more disruptive around data, technology, and kind of making it a bit more personal. You know, we're really trying to change what that perception is.
That's what I quite often describe to people, that we're a technology-based startup business, well now 22 months in, that happen to be accountants.
Yeah.
So actually we're like any other growing business. Yeah. We just happen to be specialised in accounting.
And accounting is a skill set, and actually probably about 25-30% of what we do is core accounting. The rest of it is something is pushing the boundaries, if you like, of what accounting is. It's still accounting, but it's in those realms of 70-80% is in the realms of what people have, like general public has no idea of what accountants do. And so it's more around business advice, more around data analytics.
But that's the difficulty. A lot of accountants do what the perception is of the public. But then, we're changing the way we do things and the way the industry does things. And that's why we're a new breed in that sense, that not everyone realises accountants can do that. And the good ones, there are obviously others, the good ones do that, but it's just doing it well.
Anything else to share before we wrap up?
No, I think that's good. Our ping pong bats arrived today, so it'd be good to go.
So let's go and play some ping pong. So just a little bit of insight about how Luke and I got started, and a little bit more about how we feel about the accounting profession and what it's like to be an accountant. Yeah, and it'd be good to share some more similar thoughts down the line on other kind of areas about what we're involved in and what we're getting up to. Yeah, absolutely. So look out for that, and fire us any comments or questions through.